Jonathan Carter had everything: wealth, power, prestige. But at a gala he saw a woman from his past, and the son he never knew he had. As regret flooded him, he faced a question. Could he rebuild what he had destroyed? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Jonathan Carter adjusted his black tie as he looked at himself in the mirror of his penthouse bathroom. At 52, he still had the good looks and commanding presence that had helped him climb to the top. His dark hair now had distinguished streaks of grey at the temples, and the lines around his eyes told stories of ruthless business deals and sleepless nights spent building his empire. "Mr. Carter, your car is waiting," his assistant's voice came through the intercom. "I'll be down in a minute," Jonathan replied, taking one last look at himself. Tonight was the annual Riverside Foundation Charity Gala, where New York's elite gathered to donate millions while showing off their wealth. As one of the city's most successful real estate developers, Jonathan's attendance was expected. These events bored him, but they were necessary for maintaining his social standing and business connections. His phone buzzed with a message from Diane Hughes, his current girlfriend, 20 years his junior and a rising fashion model. Running late. "Meet you there," her text read. Jonathan frowned. It was the third time this month she'd been late to an important event. But what did it matter? Their relationship was mostly for show anyway. Like everything else in his life, it served a purpose. As his private driver navigated through Manhattan traffic, Jonathan reviewed some documents on his tablet. Carter Developments was about to acquire a struggling rival company, adding another victory to his long list of conquests. "We've arrived, sir," the driver announced as they pulled up to the red carpet outside the Plaza Hotel. Camera flashes greeted him as he stepped out of the car. Jonathan put on his practiced smile, the one that never quite reached his eyes. He nodded to reporters and shook hands with business associates as he made his way inside. The ballroom was already filled with New York's richest and most powerful people. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, reflecting light onto designer dresses and expensive jewelry. Waiters carried trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres, weaving between groups of people engaged in meaningless small talk. "Jonathan, there you are," called Richard Banks, one of his oldest business associates. "Come meet the folks from Westridge Investments. They're interested in that new development in Brooklyn." Jonathan spent the next hour doing what he did best: charming potential investors and intimidating competitors. He was in the middle of describing his latest project when something caught his eye across the room. A woman with elegant, silver-streaked dark hair stood by one of the tall windows. She wore a simple but stunning navy blue dress that contrasted with the flashier outfits around her. There was something hauntingly familiar about the way she held herself, the gentle tilt of her head as she listened to someone speaking. Jonathan froze mid-sentence when she turned slightly, revealing her profile. Lena, 20 years had passed, but he would recognize her anywhere. Lena Williams. No, she would still be Lena Carter unless she had remarried. The thought struck him with unexpected force. "Excuse me," he muttered to the group around him, not waiting for a response as he moved across the room. His heart pounded against his ribs. What was she doing here? Lena had never been part of this world. When he'd known her when they were married, they'd barely had enough money for rent in their tiny apartment. As he got closer, he saw that time had been kind to her. At 48, Lena was still beautiful, though in a different way than the young woman he'd abandoned. There was a quiet confidence about her now, a strength he hadn't seen before. She was speaking to a young man whose back was turned to Jonathan. Tall, with broad shoulders and dark hair, something about his posture seemed strangely familiar. Jonathan was 10 feet away when Lena looked up and saw him. The smile she'd been offering her companion froze, then faded. Her eyes widened slightly, the only indication that his presence had affected her. The young man noticed her change in expression and turned around. Jonathan stopped, dead in his tracks. It was like looking at a photograph of himself from 30 years ago. The same strong jawline, the same intense dark eyes. The young man was taller than Jonathan, more athletic, but the resemblance was undeniable. "Mom," the young man said, his voice carrying clearly through the suddenly quiet space between them. "Is that him?" "Mom." The word echoed in Jonathan's head. Lena placed a gentle hand on the young man's arm. "Yes, Matthew. That's Jonathan Carter. Matthew." The name meant nothing to Jonathan, and yet suddenly it meant everything. "You look surprised." "To see us," Lena said, her voice steady but cool. Jonathan struggled to find words. "I didn't expect to see you here." Matthew's eyes hardened as he studied Jonathan. "Funny. I've been expecting to meet you my whole life." The implications of those words hit Jonathan like a physical blow. He looked from Matthew to Lena, trying to make sense of what was happening. Jonathan couldn't finish the question. "Your son," Lena completed for him. "He's 22 now. 22. Jonathan did the math quickly. That meant Lena had been pregnant when he left. She had been carrying his child, and he hadn't known. Or had he? Had there been signs he'd ignored? In his rush to leave everything behind? "Why don't we move this conversation somewhere more private?" Lena suggested, glancing around at the curious onlookers who were beginning to notice the tense exchange. Jonathan nodded numbly and led them to a small sitting area away from the main ballroom. His mind raced, trying to process this revelation. A son. He had a son. "How did you find me?" he asked once they were seated. Matthew let out a short, humorless laugh. "Find you? You're in the business section of the papers every other week. Your face is on billboards all over the city. It wasn't exactly detective work." "What Matthew means," Lena cut in, "is that we weren't looking for you. We're here because the foundation supports Matthew's research at Columbia Medical School." Jonathan looked at his son with new eyes. "You're a doctor?" "Almost." "Finishing my degree in oncology research," Matthew replied stiffly. Pride and emotion Jonathan rarely felt surged through him. His son was going to be a doctor, a researcher working to cure cancer. "Why didn't you tell me?" Jonathan asked Lena, his voice barely above a whisper. Lena's calm facade cracked slightly. "Tell you disappeared, Jonathan. No note, no phone call, just empty closets and a bank account drained to the last penny. How exactly was I supposed to tell you anything?" The accusation in her eyes made him look away. She was right, of course. He had left without a word, convinced that their marriage was holding him back from the success he craved. "I tried to find you those first few months," Lena continued, "but you made it clear you wanted nothing to do with your old life. With me." Matthew shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, we don't have to do this now." "No, it's all right," Lena assured him. "It's been 20 years. I think we can have a civil conversation." Jonathan looked at his son. The word still felt strange even, in his thoughts. "I didn't know about you," he said simply. "If I had—" "What?" Matthew challenged. "You would have stayed, played happy family. Your actions made your priorities pretty clear." Before Jonathan could respond, a woman's voice interrupted them. "Johnny, there you are. I've been looking everywhere for you." Diane approached, her red designer dress drawing eyes from across the room. She was beautiful in the way that expensive. Things are beautiful, perfect but somehow empty. She stopped short when she noticed the tense group. "Oh, I'm sorry, am I interrupting?" "Diane, this is Lena and Matthew," Jonathan said, not sure how to explain who they were. "Nice to meet you," Diane said automatically, extending a manicured hand. "Are you investors in the new project?" Matthew stood up abruptly. "No, I'm his son." The words fell like rocks into still water. "And we were just leaving." Diane's perfect eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Son? Johnny, you never mentioned having a son." "He didn't know," Lena said, also rising. "And now he does. Matthew, we should go. You have an early class tomorrow." Jonathan stood too. "Wait, please. Can we talk again? I want to explain." Matthew looked at him with eyes that held 22 years of absence. "What's to explain? You made a choice. We all lived with it." "At least let me have your number," Jonathan said desperately, "or take my card." Lena hesitated, then nodded. "Give me your card. I can't promise anything, but maybe we can talk, for Matthew's sake." Jonathan fumbled for his wallet, handing her his business card with trembling fingers. Their hands brushed briefly, and memories of a simpler life flashed through his mind. "Goodbye, Jonathan," Lena said quietly. "It was interesting seeing you again." Matthew said nothing, just gave a curt nod before following his mother out of the sitting area. Jonathan watched them leave, feeling as though his carefully constructed world had suddenly shifted on its axis. For 20 years he had measured success in dollars and deals. Now in the space of a few minutes all of that seemed hollow. "Johnny, what's going on?" Diane asked, her voice laced with confusion and irritation. "You have a son you never knew. About? This is the kind of thing you should tell a person." Jonathan barely heard her. His mind was racing back through the years, to the ambitious young man who had convinced himself that love was a distraction from success. How wrong he had been. "I need to go," he said suddenly. "Go? We just got here. The auction hasn't even started." "I'm sorry. This is important." Jonathan pulled out his phone and called his driver. "I need some time to think." As he left the gala, ignoring the confused calls from business associates and the hurt expression on Diane's face, Jonathan could think only of the family he never knew he had and the 20 years of his son's life that he had missed. In his penthouse later that night, Jonathan stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city he had conquered. In one hand he held a glass of scotch, in the other an old photograph he had kept hidden in his desk drawer. It showed a much younger version of himself with his arm around Lena, both of them smiling with the hopeful innocence of youth. One decision had cost him 20 years. Now he had one chance to make things right, but first he would have to face the hardest truth of all. In gaining everything he thought he wanted, he had lost what mattered most. For 3 days, Jonathan barely left his penthouse. He cancelled meetings, ignored calls from Diane, and spent hours staring at his phone, willing it to ring. The business empire that had consumed his life for 2 decades suddenly felt meaningless compared to the revelation that he had a son. On the morning of the 4th day, his assistant Margaret buzzed through the intercom. "Mr. Carter, you have a visitor. A Miss Lena Carter is here to see you." Jonathan nearly dropped his coffee mug. "Send her up immediately." He rushed around his living room, straightening magazines and adjusting cushions like a nervous teenager. When the elevator doors opened directly into his penthouse, Lena stepped out, looking composed in simple slacks and a blue blouse. "Thank you for seeing me," Jonathan said, his voice rough with emotion. Lena's eyes took in the luxurious apartment, the modern art on the walls, the Italian furniture, the panoramic view of Central Park. "So this is what you left us for," she said quietly. The words stung because they were true. "Can I get you something to drink? Coffee? Tea?" "Coffee. Black," she replied, settling onto the edge of a sleek leather sofa. As Jonathan busied himself in the kitchen, he struggled to organize his thoughts. There were so many questions, so many things to say, but where to start? He returned with 2 mugs and sat across from her. "Is Matthew with you?" Lena shook her head. "He's at the hospital, clinical rotations." "He seems remarkable," Jonathan offered. "He is, no thanks to you." The words weren't spoken with venom, just as a simple statement of fact. Jonathan flinched anyway. "I deserve that. I deserve much worse." Lena sighed, setting down her coffee. "I didn't come here to punish you, Jonathan. I came because Matthew deserves to know his father, if that's something you're interested in." "Of course I am," Jonathan said quickly. "More than anything." "Even more than your next big deal?" Lena asked, raising an eyebrow. "Because that's what always came first before." Jonathan looked away, unable to meet her gaze. "I've changed, Lena." "Have you? Or has the shock of discovering you have a son just thrown you temporarily off balance?" She leaned forward. "Because Matthew doesn't need someone who will walk in and out of his life when it's convenient. He's had enough disappointment already." The implication that his son had suffered hurt Jonathan deeply. "Tell me about him," he said. "Tell me everything I've missed." Lena's expression softened slightly. "He was born on September 12th, a difficult birth, 36 hours of labor. I was alone except for my sister, Rachel." Jonathan closed his eyes, imagining Lena going through that without him. "He was colicky for the first 6 months," she continued. "Barely slept. I was working 2 jobs then, receptionist during the day, waitressing at night. Rachel would watch him when I worked. "How did you manage?" Jonathan asked, his voice barely audible. "I didn't have a choice," Lena replied simply. "I did what I had to do." Over the next hour, she told him about Matthew's childhood, his first steps in their small apartment in Queens, his early interest in science, the time he broke his arm falling from a tree when he was 8. She showed him photos from her wallet, school pictures through the years that documented the boy's growth into the young man Jonathan had met at the gala. "He was always asking about you," Lena said, putting away the photos. "When he was little, I told him his daddy was away working. As he got older, I had to tell him more of the truth, that you had left us." "What did you tell him about why I left?" Lena met his eyes directly. "I told him that you weren't ready to be a husband or father, that you had dreams that didn't include us." The truth of her words cut deeper than any accusation could have. Jonathan stood and walked to the window, trying to compose himself. "When I left," he said finally, "I told myself I was doing what was necessary to succeed, that I couldn't build the life I wanted with distractions." "Distractions," Lena repeated, the word hanging in the air between them. "Is that what we were to you?" Jonathan turned back to her. "That's what I convinced myself. I was young and stupid and ambitious. I thought I needed to be ruthless to succeed, and that meant cutting all ties, even to the people I—" He stopped himself. "Even to the people you what, Jonathan?" Lena pressed. "Even to the people I loved," he finished quietly. Lena looked away, blinking rapidly. "It's a bit late for declarations of love, don't you think?" "I'm not declaring anything," Jonathan said. "I'm just trying to explain why I did what I did. Not to excuse it, but to make sense of it, for both of us." The silence that followed was interrupted by Lena's phone ringing. She checked it quickly. "It's Matthew. He's finished his rotation earlier than expected." "Does he know you're here?" Jonathan asked. Lena nodded. "He's the one who suggested I come. Despite everything, he wants to know you." She answered the phone. "Hi, honey. Yes, I'm still here, actually." She looked at Jonathan. "Would you like to join us? We were planning to have lunch." Jonathan's heart leapt. "Yes, absolutely." 30 minutes later, they were seated at a quiet table in the back of a modest Italian restaurant in the West Village, the kind of place Jonathan would never have chosen for himself, but which clearly had significance for Lena and Matthew. "Mom and I come here every Sunday," Matthew explained stiffly as they studied their menus. "Since I was a kid." Jonathan nodded, trying not to think about all the Sunday meals he had missed. "It seems nice. The owner, Marco, used to let me do my homework in the back booth when Mom worked the dinner shift," Matthew added. "He helped me with math." Another man who had been there for his son when he wasn't. Jonathan swallowed hard. That was kind of him. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table until their waiter arrived to take their orders. Jonathan noticed the easy familiarity between the server and Lena and Matthew, another reminder of the life they had built without him. After ordering, Matthew fixed Jonathan with a direct stare. "So Mom said you want to get to know me." "I do," Jonathan replied, meeting his son's gaze. "Very much." "Why? Because you suddenly discovered I exist? Or because I turned out to be someone you can be proud of?" There was a challenge in Matthew's voice. "Would you be sitting here if I wasn't in medical school? If I was just some average guy working a regular job?" "Matthew," Lena said gently, "that's not fair." "No, it's a valid question," Jonathan said. "And the honest answer is that I don't know. I can't say what I would have done in a different situation because this is the only one I've faced." He leaned forward. "But I do know that the moment I realized you were my son, nothing else mattered. Not who you are or what you do, just that you're my son." Matthew's expression remained skeptical. "That's easy to say now." "You're right to doubt me," Jonathan admitted. "I haven't earned your trust, but I'd like the chance to try." Their food arrived, temporarily pausing the conversation. As they ate, Jonathan tried to learn more about his son's life. Matthew's answers were short at first, but gradually, as they discussed his research in cancer treatment, he became more animated. "The problem with current therapies They're too destructive, Matthew explained, his eyes lighting up with passion. My research focuses on targeted treatments that attack only the cancer cells, leaving healthy tissue untouched. Jonathan listened, fascinated not just by the subject, but by the intelligence and commitment his son displayed. That's incredible work. How did you get interested in oncology specifically? Matthew's expression darkened. Grandma Williams, Mom's mother, died of breast cancer when I was 12. She lived with us for her last year. I'm sorry, Jonathan said. I didn't know. There's a lot you don't know, Matthew replied, the edge returning to his voice. Lena intervened smoothly. Matthew's research is being funded by the Riverside Foundation. That's why we were at the gala. He received one of their Young Scientist grants. It's very competitive, Matthew added. Only 5 are awarded each year. The pride in his voice, was unmistakable, and Jonathan felt a corresponding surge of pride, followed immediately by shame that he had done nothing to help his son achieve this success. I'd love to hear more about your research, Jonathan said sincerely. Perhaps I could visit your lab sometime? Matthew hesitated, then gave a small nod. Maybe. I'll think about it. It wasn't much, but it was something. A tiny opening. As they finished their meal, Jonathan knew he needed to address the elephant in the room. I want to help you, he said directly. Financially, I mean. Your education, your research, whatever you need. Matthew's face hardened. I don't want your money. Matthew has a full scholarship, Lena explained, and his grant covers his research expenses. Still, Jonathan persisted, there must be something. We've managed for 22 years without your help, Matthew cut in. We don't need it now. Jonathan nodded, trying to hide his hurt. I understand, but the offer stands. If you ever change your mind. As they were preparing to leave, Jonathan's phone buzzed repeatedly. He ignored it until Lena gave him permission to check with a nod. I'm sorry, he said, looking at the screen. It's my office. There's a situation with the Westridge acquisition. The one everyone at the gala was talking about? Matthew asked. You're buying out your competitor. Jonathan nodded. It's a complicated deal, months of work. Then you should take it, Lena said, standing. We understand how important your business is to you. The old Jonathan would have jumped at the excuse to leave. Business first always. But looking at his son and the woman he had once loved, Jonathan made a different choice. They can handle it without me, he said, silencing his phone. This is more important. Something flickered in Lena's eyes, surprise perhaps, or a hint of respect. We should go anyway, she said. Matthew has studying to do and I have a class to teach. You teach? Jonathan asked, realizing how little he still knew about her life. High school English, she replied. For the past 15 years, Jonathan paid the bill over their protests and walked them outside. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of nearby bakeries and coffee shops. Thank you for today, he said, feeling awkward as they prepared to part. Could we do this again, maybe dinner later this week? Lena looked at Matthew, leaving the decision to him. I have a presentation on Friday, Matthew said after a moment. At the medical school. It's about my research. If you want to come, you could. Jonathan felt a surge of emotion. I'd be honored. What time? 4 o'clock. Columbia Medical Center, Hamilton Hall, room 302. I'll be there, Jonathan promised. Thank you for the invitation. As he watched them walk away, Jonathan felt something he hadn't experienced in years, hope mixed with regret. He had missed so much, but perhaps it wasn't too late to be part of their lives. Back at his penthouse, Jonathan cancelled his afternoon meetings and pulled out his laptop. He spent hours researching oncology, trying to understand Matthew's work better. Then he did something he hadn't done in 20 years. He searched for information about Lena. Her school's website had a teacher profile with a small photo. Ms. Carter has been teaching English at Roosevelt High School since 2009. The page read. She sponsors the Creative Writing Club and has led the debate team to 3 city championships. Jonathan read every word, trying to piece together the life of the woman he had once known so intimately, but who was now a stranger. Had she dated other men? Been in serious relationships? The absence of a wedding ring suggested she had never. remarried. But that didn't mean she had been alone all these years. The thought of Lena with someone else created an unexpected ache in his chest. What right did he have to feel anything about her life after he had abandoned her? His phone rang, breaking his reverie. It was Diane. "Johnny, where have you been? I've been calling for days." "I'm sorry, Diane. Something important came up." "More important than me, than us?" Her voice rose. "Everyone at the gala was talking about that woman and her son, your son. Is that what this is about?" "Yes," Jonathan admitted. "I need time to figure this out." "Figure what out? You can acknowledge the kid without disappearing on me. We have the benefit at the Met tomorrow night. You promised you'd be my date." Jonathan closed his eyes. "I can't make it, I'm sorry." "You're choosing them over me?" Diane sounded incredulous. "I'm choosing to try to know my son," Jonathan replied. "I've missed 22 years of his life. I can't miss any more." The line went silent for a moment. "Call me when you get your priorities straight," Diane finally said, hanging up. Jonathan set down his phone, feeling strangely unburdened. For the first time in years, his priorities were exactly right. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Carter, Mr. Reynolds is here to see you about the Westridge deal," Margaret announced. "Tell him I'm busy," Jonathan replied, "and clear my schedule for Friday. Good afternoon. I have a presentation to attend at Columbia Medical School." As Margaret confirmed the change, Jonathan turned back to his computer. There was so much to learn, so much time to make up for. And for once in his life, business would have to wait. Friday arrived and Jonathan was up before dawn. He had barely slept, anxious about attending Matthew's presentation. His closet full of designer suits suddenly seemed inappropriate for a University Medical School event. After trying on and discarding several options, he settled on a simple navy blazer with grey slacks, still expensive but less ostentatious. He arrived at Columbia Medical Center an hour early, navigating the busy hallways until he found room 302. The door was open, revealing a medium-sized lecture hall with tiered seating. A young woman with curly hair was setting up a laptop at the podium. "Excuse me," Jonathan said. "Is this where Matthew Carter will be presenting today?" The woman looked up. "Yes, but he's not here yet." "Are you a faculty member?" "No, Jonathan hesitated. "I'm his father." The woman's eyes widened in surprise. "Oh, I didn't know Matt's dad was coming. I'm Sophia, one of his research partners." "Nice to meet you, Sophia. Does Matthew talk about me?" Jonathan couldn't help asking. Sophia looked uncomfortable. Not really. He just mentioned that his dad wasn't in the picture. But I'm glad you're here now. He's been working really hard on this presentation." Jonathan nodded, trying to hide his disappointment. Of course, Matthew wouldn't have talked about him. What was there to say? "Can you tell me about the research you're doing together?" Sophia brightened. "We're developing a new delivery method for cancer drugs that targets only the tumor cells through a specific protein marker. Matt's the real genius behind it. I just help with the lab work." "He sounds exceptional," Jonathan said with pride. Sophia agreed. "Everyone knows he's going to do something amazing in this field." She checked her watch. "He should be here soon if you want to wait. I need to finish setting." Jonathan thanked her and took a seat in the back row. Gradually, the room filled with students and professors. At 5 minutes to 4, he spotted Lena entering. She scanned the room, surprised when she saw him, and made her way over. "You came?" she said, sitting beside him. "I promised I would." Lena looked at her watch. "You're early. I thought for sure you'd be rushing in at the last minute with some business emergency." "Not today," Jonathan replied. "Nothing could keep me away from this." Something in his tone made Lena study him more carefully. This means a lot to Matthew, even if he won't admit it. Before Jonathan could respond, Matthew entered the room, carrying a folder and looking nervous but determined. He wore a white shirt and tie under his lab coat. His eyes swept the audience, pausing when he saw Jonathan and Lena. For a moment he looked surprised, then gave a small nod of acknowledgement. The faculty advisor introduced Matthew, listing his impressive credentials and the awards his research had already won. Jonathan listened with growing amazement at his son's accomplishments. When Matthew began his presentation, his nervousness vanished. He spoke with confidence and clarity about complex medical concepts, using slides to illustrate his points. Jonathan didn't understand all the technical details, but he grasped enough to know that his son's work could potentially save thousands of lives. The traditional approach to chemotherapy is like using a sledgehammer when what we need is a scalpel, Matthew explained. Our targeted delivery system allows us to attack cancer cells with precision while leaving healthy tissue untouched. As he watched his son command the room, Jonathan felt an overwhelming mix of pride and regret. This brilliant young man had grown up without him. What role might he have played in Matthew's development if he had been there? What father-son moments had he missed? After the presentation, Matthew fielded questions from the audience with impressive knowledge and poise. When the session ended, he was surrounded by professors and fellow students offering congratulations. Jonathan and Lena waited patiently until the crowd thinned. Matthew approached them, looking slightly flushed from the success of his presentation. "You were amazing," Lena said, hugging him tightly. "I understood maybe half of it, but I could tell everyone was impressed." "Thanks, Mom," Matthew said, then turned to Jonathan. "You actually came." "I said I would," Jonathan replied, "and it was incredible. You're doing important work, Matthew." Something in Jonathan's sincere tone seemed to reach his son. Matthew's guarded expression softened slightly. "Thanks, that means something coming from someone who knows about success." It was a small olive branch, and Jonathan grasped it gratefully. "I'd love to hear more about your research, maybe over dinner." "My treat, to celebrate your successful presentation." Matthew glanced at his mother, who nodded encouragingly. "Sure, I guess that would be okay." As they left the building, Sophia called out to Matthew, "Matt, we're all going to Barney's to celebrate. Are you coming?" Matthew looked torn. "I'm having dinner with my mom and my dad." Sophia's face lit up. "That's great. How about you all join us? The whole team would love to meet your parents." Matthew looked questioningly at Jonathan and Lena. "Would that be okay? It's just a casual place where we all hang out." "Of course," Lena said immediately. "I'd be delighted," Jonathan added. Though the thought of a student bar was far from his usual social scene, Barney's turned out to be a crowded pub a few blocks from campus, filled with medical students unwinding after a long week. Matthew's research team had pushed several tables together in the back. They welcomed Lena warmly. Clearly she had met them before, and regarded Jonathan with curious interest. "So you're Matt's dad," said a young man with glasses, introducing himself as Kevin. "He never mentioned you were rich and famous," supplied another student, earning an elbow from Sophia. "I'm not famous," Jonathan said with a self-deprecating smile. "Just lucky in business. Dad builds things," Matthew explained to his friends. "Buildings, mostly." It was the first time Matthew had called him Dad instead of Jonathan, and the word sent a surge of emotion through him. The evening progressed more comfortably than Jonathan could have imagined. Matthew's friends were bright and engaging, and they clearly respected him. Watching his son laugh and debate with his peers, Jonathan saw a whole side of Matthew he hadn't glimpsed before, more relaxed, quick-witted, and popular. "He's always been like this," Lena said quietly, noticing Jonathan's observation. "The serious student who's also the heart of any group." "He gets that from you," Jonathan replied. "You always could light up a room." Lena looked surprised at the compliment. "That was a long time ago, Jonathan." "Not so long that I've forgotten," he said. Their eyes met briefly, and Jonathan felt a flicker of the connection they had once shared. Then Matthew called their attention to a story Kevin was telling, and the moment passed. Later, as the group began to disperse, Matthew pulled Jonathan aside. "Listen, I've been thinking about your offer, the financial help." "Yes?" Jonathan tried, to keep the eagerness from his voice. "I still don't want your money for myself," Matthew said firmly, "but our lab could use better equipment. If you're serious about supporting my work, maybe you could donate to the research fund? It wouldn't just help me, it would help the whole team." Jonathan felt a surge of joy at this request. It wasn't personal acceptance, but it was a step in that direction. "I would be honored to do that. Just tell me who to contact." Matthew nodded. "I'll email you the details." He hesitated, then added, "Thanks for coming today. It meant something. They said their goodbyes outside the bar. As Matthew hailed a cab for himself and Lena, Jonathan realized he didn't want the evening to end. "Could I give you both a ride?" he offered. "My car is just around the corner." Matthew shook his head. "I've got an early shift at the hospital tomorrow, but maybe we could talk again soon." "I'd like that," Jonathan said, trying not to sound too eager. After they left, Jonathan walked slowly back to where his driver was waiting. The night air was cool against his face, but he barely noticed. His son had called him Dad. His son wanted to talk again. Small victories, but they felt monumental. The next morning, Jonathan was reviewing some contracts when his assistant buzzed through the intercom. "Mr. Carter, there's a Mr. Richard Westridge here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment." Jonathan frowned. Richard Westridge was the CEO of the company he was in the process of acquiring, a hostile takeover that had been in the works for months. "Send him in." Westridge stormed into the office, his face flushed with anger. "What kind of game are you playing, Carter? First you drive my company's stock into the ground, then you swoop in with this lowball offer, and now you're dragging your feet on signing the final papers." Jonathan remained calm. "I'm not playing games, Richard. The deal is proceeding as planned." "Not according to your team," Westridge countered. "They told me you've been unavailable all week, missing crucial meetings. My board is getting nervous and we have other interested parties." Jonathan leaned back in his chair. A week ago, the thought of losing this acquisition would have sent him into a frenzy. Now he found himself strangely detached. "Are you threatening to walk away from our deal?" "I'm saying you need to show some commitment," Westridge replied. "This isn't some small real estate transaction. This is my life's work you're buying." The word struck Jonathan with unexpected force. Life's work. That's how he had always viewed his business, as his legacy. But what kind of legacy was a portfolio of buildings compared to a son? "I understand, Richard," Jonathan said, standing. "And I appreciate your patience. The deal will go through as planned. You have my word." After Westridge left, somewhat mollified, Jonathan called in his executive team. "I need you to finalize the Westridge acquisition without me," he told them. "Ken, you'll take point on this." Ken Rogers, his longtime second-in-command, looked stunned. "But you've been personally handling this deal from the start. It's your baby." "I trust you to see it through," Jonathan said. "I have some personal matters that need my attention right now." After the meeting, Ken lingered behind. "Is everything okay, Jonathan? You've been different this past week." Jonathan considered how to answer. He had always kept his personal life entirely separate from business, but now the lines were blurring. "I recently discovered I have a son," he said simply. "He's 22 and I've missed his entire life. I'm trying to make up for lost time." Ken's eyes widened. "That's... wow. I had no idea." "Neither did I until recently," Jonathan replied. "It's made me rethink some priorities." "So that's who that young man was at the gala? The one who looks just like you?" Jonathan nodded. "His name is Matthew. He's in medical school, researching cancer treatments." "Her doctor instead of a businessman," Ken mused. "Must be a disappointment." "No," Jonathan said firmly. "Quite the opposite. I couldn't be prouder of him." After Ken left, Jonathan checked his email. There was a message from Matthew with the contact. "Information for the research fund and a brief note. Dr. Patel oversees the fund. Thanks for your interest in our work." It was formal, almost impersonal, but it was communication, a thread connecting him to his son. Jonathan immediately called Dr. Patel and arranged a meeting for that afternoon. The medical school's research department was housed in a modern building on the north side of campus. Dr. Patel, a distinguished woman in her 60s, greeted Jonathan with professional courtesy. "Mr. Carter, Matthew told me you might be contacting us. He speaks very highly of your interest in his research." Jonathan doubted that was exactly how Matthew had phrased it, but he appreciated the sentiment. "I want to make a significant contribution to support his work." "What are your most pressing needs?" Dr. Patel's eyes lit up. "Where do I start? Our imaging equipment is outdated, we're short on lab space, and funding for clinical trials is always a challenge." "What would it take to address all of those issues?" Jonathan asked. Dr. Patel named a figure that would have given most donors pause. Jonathan didn't blink. Consider it done. I'll have my foundation transfer the funds next week." The doctor looked stunned. "Mr. Carter, that's extraordinarily generous. May I ask what prompted such a substantial gift?" Jonathan considered his answer carefully. "Let's just say I'm investing in the future. My son's future, and the future of everyone who might benefit from his research." After setting up the details of the donation, Jonathan asked Dr. Patel for a tour of Matthew's lab. The space was cramped, but well organized, with sophisticated equipment crowded onto limited bench space. "This is where Matthew works?" Jonathan asked, trying to imagine his son in this environment. "Usually late into the night," Dr. Patel confirmed. "He's one of our most dedicated researchers. His mother must be very proud." "She is," Jonathan said, feeling keenly that he had no right to claim any part of that pride for himself. "They've done remarkably well without me." Dr. Patel gave him a curious look but didn't pry. "Your donation will transform what we can accomplish here. I'll make sure Matthew knows the extent of your generosity." "Actually," Jonathan said, "I'd prefer if you didn't mention the exact amount. I don't want him to think I'm trying to buy his affection." "I understand," Dr. Patel said with a knowing nod. "Family relationships can be complicated." On his way out of the building, Jonathan nearly collided with Lena, who was carrying a brown paper bag. "Jonathan, what are you doing here?" she asked, clearly surprised. "I had a meeting with Dr. Patel about supporting the research fund," he explained. "Matthew emailed me the contact information." Lena nodded. That's good of you." She held up the bag. "I'm bringing Matthew some dinner. He texted that he'd be working late again. He's here now." Jonathan felt a surge of hope at the chance to see his son again. "In the lab," Lena confirmed. "But I should warn you, he gets pretty focused when he's working. He might not be in a talkative mood." "I understand. I just want to say a quick hello, if that's okay." They rode the elevator together in silence. Jonathan noticed that Lena looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes. "Is everything all right?" he asked. "You seem exhausted," Lena sighed. "End of semester grading. 30 essays on The Great Gatsby still to go." "Can I help somehow?" Jonathan offered, then immediately felt foolish. What could he do to help with English papers? To his surprise, Lena smiled, the first genuine smile she had given him since their reunion. "Unless you've suddenly developed expertise in American literature, probably not, but thanks for the offer." They found Matthew hunched over a microscope, making notes on a pad beside him. He looked up when they entered, surprise crossing his face at seeing both his parents together. "Mom and Jonathan? What are you both doing here?" "Dinner delivery," Lena said, holding up the bag. "And I ran into your father downstairs. He had a meeting with Dr. Patel." Matthew's eyes narrowed slightly. "About the donation?" Jonathan nodded. "It's all arranged. Dr. Patel is handling the details." Thank you," Matthew said somewhat stiffly. "It will help our work a lot." An awkward silence fell. Jonathan searched for something to say that wouldn't sound intrusive or presumptuous. "Your lab is impressive," he offered finally. "Dr. Patel showed me around." Matthew's expression softened slightly. "It's not much compared to the private research facilities, but we make it work. Sometimes the most groundbreaking discoveries come from modest beginnings," Jonathan said. "My first office was a converted storage closet in a run-down building. In Queens, this seemed to catch Matthew's interest. Really? Mom always said you were ambitious, but she never told me how you got started." Jonathan glanced at Lena, who was arranging Matthew's dinner on a clear corner of the lab bench. "It wasn't very impressive, just me and a telephone cold calling. Potential investors." "And now you own half of Manhattan," Matthew said with a hint of his usual edge. "Not quite half," Jonathan replied with a small smile. "Maybe a quarter at most." To his surprise, Matthew laughed, a brief, genuine sound that reminded Jonathan so much of his own laugh that it took his breath away. "I should get back to work," Matthew said, gesturing to his microscope. "These cell cultures won't analyze themselves." "Of course," Jonathan said, trying to hide his disappointment at the short interaction. "Don't let us interrupt you." As they prepared to leave, Matthew called out, "Hey, Jonathan, I'm playing basketball with some friends on Sunday morning at the university courts if you want to come." Jonathan, who hadn't played basketball in 20 years, felt a surge of joy at the invitation. "What time?" "9. It's nothing serious. Just a casual game." "I'll be there," Jonathan promised. As he and Lena rode the elevator back down, Jonathan couldn't contain his smile. "He invited me to play basketball." "Don't read too much into it," Lena cautioned. "He's still processing all of this." "I know," Jonathan said, "but it's a start." They reached the ground floor and Jonathan hesitated before asking, "Would you like a ride home? It's late and you said you're tired." Lena seemed about to refuse, then reconsidered. "Actually, that would be nice. I have a stack of papers waiting. For me, and the subway is always crowded this time of night." In the car, they sat in surprisingly comfortable silence until Lena said, "You seem different today. With Matthew." "Different how?" "Less corporate. More human," she explained. "When we were married, you were always so focused on the next deal, the next meeting. Even when you were physically present, your mind was somewhere else." Jonathan winced at the accuracy of her description. "I was a fool," he said simply. "I thought success meant making money, having power. I didn't understand what really mattered." "And you do now?" Lena asked skeptically. "I'm learning," Jonathan replied. "Starting with the fact that no business deal will ever be as important as the chance to know my son." When they arrived at Lena's address, Jonathan was surprised to see a modest brownstone in a middle-class neighborhood in Brooklyn. "This is where you live?" Lena nodded. "We've been here since Matthew was 10. It's not fancy, but it's home." Jonathan, try to imagine them living here. Matthew growing up, doing homework at the kitchen table. Lena grading papers in the evenings. A normal family life that he had never experienced, either as a child or as an adult. "Thank you for the ride," Lena said, interrupting his thoughts. "And thank you for what you did today. The donation. It means a lot to Matthew even if he doesn't show it." "I'd do anything for him," Jonathan said honestly. "And for you if you'd let me." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. Then Lena opened the car door. "Good night." "Jonathan, don't forget. Basketball courts, Sunday at 9. "I'll be there," he promised again, watching as she walked up the steps to her home. The home he should have helped create, the life he should have shared. As his driver pulled away, Jonathan made a silent vow. He couldn't change the past 20 years, but he could make sure the next 20 were different. For Matthew, for Lena, and for the man he was finally learning to become. Sunday morning arrived with perfect weather, clear skies and mild temperatures. Jonathan woke early, nervous about the basketball game. He hadn't played in years, but that wasn't what concerned him. This would be the first time Matthew had willingly included him in an activity, and he was terrified of saying or doing something wrong. After trying on and discarding several athletic outfits that seemed either too expensive or too obviously new, he settled on simple basketball shorts and a plain t-shirt. Looking in the mirror, he hardly recognized himself without his usual designer suit. He arrived at the university courts 15 minutes early and sat on a bench watching as students and faculty members played casual games. At precisely 9 o'clock, he spotted Matthew walking toward the courts with Sophia and several other young men from the research team. Matthew raised a hand in greeting. "You actually came," he said, sounding surprised despite Jonathan's promise. "I said I would." It was becoming their ritual exchange, Matthew's doubt and Jonathan's reassurance. "Do you even play basketball?" Matthew asked skeptically. "I used to," Jonathan admitted. "In college. I'm probably a bit rusty now." They divided into teams, Matthew, Jonathan, and Kevin against Sophia and 2 other researchers. To Jonathan's relief, the game was indeed casual, with plenty of good-natured trash talk and laughter. At first, Jonathan played cautiously, passing the ball whenever it came to him and taking few shots. But as the game progressed, muscle memory kicked in. He intercepted a pass and drove to the basket for a clean layup. "Not bad for an old guy," Matthew commented, but there was a hint of approval in his voice. Encouraged, Jonathan became more active in the game. He wasn't as fast or as agile as the younger players, but he made up for it with smart positioning and unexpected moves. During a water break, Matthew studied him curiously. Mom never mentioned you played basketball. There's a lot about me she probably didn't tell you, Jonathan replied. Some good, some not so good. Like what? Matthew asked, surprising Jonathan with his interest. Jonathan thought for a moment. Well, I worked my way through college on a partial basketball scholarship. I was never good enough for the pros, but I could hold my own. What else? Matthew pressed. I'm a terrible cook, Jonathan admitted with a smile. Your mother used to joke that I could burn water, and I'm afraid of heights despite owning several skyscrapers. Matthew almost smiled. Mum can't cook either. We eat a lot of takeout. It was such a small, ordinary detail about their life together, but it felt like a precious gift to Jonathan. What else did I miss? He asked softly. About you growing. Up? Matthew dribbled the basketball, staring down at it, rather than meeting Jonathan's eyes. I broke my arm when I was 8, climbing a tree in the park. Mom was terrified, but I thought the cast was cool. He paused. I was terrible at Little League, but loved science camp. My first microscope was a Christmas present when I was 10. Each detail was like a photograph in an album Jonathan had never seen, glimpses of a childhood he should have witnessed firsthand. I would have liked to see all that, he said quietly. Yeah, well. Matthew bounced the ball harder. You made your choice. The words stung because they were true. I did, Jonathan agreed, and it was the worst mistake of my life. Before Matthew could respond, Sophia called them back to resume the game. The conversation was over, but something had shifted. As they played, Jonathan noticed Matthew passing him the ball more often, even setting up plays for him to score. When the game ended, their team winning by a narrow margin, everyone was sweaty and tired but in good spirits. Same time next week? Kevin asked as they gathered their things. Sure, Matthew said, then glanced at Jonathan. You're welcome to join us again if you want. Jonathan nodded, trying not to show how much the casual invitation meant to him. I'd like that. As the group dispersed, Matthew lingered. I'm meeting Mom for lunch later. She's bringing my old microscope for a kid in her class who's interested in science. He hesitated. So you could come if you're not busy. I'd love to, Jonathan said immediately. Just tell me when and where. On the way home to shower and change, Jonathan called his office and cancelled a long-standing Sunday afternoon meeting with potential investors from Dubai. Ken was dismayed. Jonathan, we've been setting this up for months, he protested. These are billionaires who don't take rejection well. Reschedule it, Jonathan insisted, or handle it yourself. I have plans I can't change. More important than a multi-billion-dollar deal? Ken sounded incredulous. Yes, Jonathan said simply. Family plans. An hour later, he met Matthew and Lena at a small cafe near the park. Lena had an old cardboard box beside her chair, presumably containing the microscope. I hope you don't mind that Matthew invited me, Jonathan said as he joined them. It's fine, Lena replied, though her expression was guarded. We're just having a quick lunch before I meet one of my students. Throughout the meal, Jonathan noticed how comfortable Lena and Matthew were with each other, the inside jokes, the way Matthew automatically passed Lena the salt before she asked for it, the proud way Lena looked at her son. They were a unit, formed through years of depending on each other. Jonathan was the outsider, and he knew it would take time, if ever, for that to change. So, he said during a lull in the conversation, I hear there's a microscope with a story. Matthew nodded, patting the box. My first real one, not a toy. I saved for months to buy it, Lena added. It was worth it to see his face on Christmas morning. Jonathan imagined a young Matthew unwrapping the gift, his excitement at receiving the tool that would help shape his future. Another moment he had missed. Now Mom's giving it to some kid in her class, Matthew explained. Jason, Lena said. He reminds me so much of you at that age. Curious about everything, always asking questions no one can answer. His family doesn't have much money, but he's brilliant. That's wonderful of you, Jonathan said sincerely. Lena shrugged. The microscope has been sitting in our storage closet for years. It should be used, not collecting dust. Still, Jonathan insisted, passing it on like that. It's generous. It's what people do when they care about each other, Matthew said pointedly. They show up, they share, they stick around. The barb found its mark, but Jonathan didn't flinch. You're right, he acknowledged. And I'm trying to learn that now, even if it's late. The rest of the lunch passed in lighter conversation. When they finished, Lena checked her watch. I should go. Jason's meeting me at the library in 20 minutes. I'll walk with you, Matthew offered. I want to say hello to the kid who's getting my microscope. Jonathan paid the bill despite Lena's protests and walked outside with them. As they prepared to part ways, he said, "Thank you for including me today. It meant a lot." Matthew nodded. Maybe we could do it again sometime. It wasn't enthusiasm, but it was acceptance. Jonathan would take it. Over the next several weeks, a cautious routine developed. Jonathan joined the Sunday basketball games, occasionally had lunch with Matthew afterward, and even attended another presentation at the medical school. Each interaction was still tinged with Matthew's lingering resentment, but the sharp edge was slowly softening. Lena remained more guarded. She was polite but distant, carefully maintaining boundaries between them. Jonathan respected her caution, but found himself increasingly drawn to the woman she had become. Stronger, more confident, yet still with the warmth that had first attracted him all those years ago. At the office, Jonathan's shifted priorities didn't go unnoticed. Ken cornered him after a meeting where Jonathan had seemed distracted. "What's going on with you?" Ken demanded. "You're passing off major decisions to the team, you're leaving early, and half the time you're not even listening in meetings." "I'm delegating," Jonathan replied calmly. "It's good management." "It's not like you," Ken insisted. "The Jonathan Carter I know would never pass up the Henderson deal to watch a basketball game." "Maybe I'm not the Jonathan Carter anymore," he said. Ken studied him. "This is about your kid, isn't it? And his mother." Jonathan didn't deny it. "I'm trying to make up for 20 years of absence by throwing away 20 years of work." Ken shook his head. "You've built an empire, Jonathan. Don't let guilt over some woman from your past destroy that." "That some woman is the mother of my son," Jonathan said sharply. "And nothing I've built matters compared to what I lost when I left them." Ken looked at him as if he'd gone mad. "You sound like a greeting card, not a businessman. What's next, selling the company and opening a flower shop?" Jonathan almost laughed at the absurdity of the suggestion, but part of him wondered, what did he want for his future now? The relentless pursuit of wealth and power no longer motivated him as it once had. "I'm not selling the company," he assured Ken, "but I am re-evaluating my priorities." That evening, Jonathan received an unexpected phone call from Lena. "I need her favor," she said without preamble. "The boiler in my building died, and the landlord says it'll take 3 days to fix. No heat or hot water." "Stay at my place," Jonathan offered immediately. "I have plenty of room." "That's not what I'm asking," Lena said quickly. "There's a hotel nearby, but they're booked solid because of some convention. Matthew suggested I call you to see if you know someone who might help me get a room." Jonathan felt a pang of disappointment but hid it. "Of course, I know the manager at the plaza. I'll make a call right away." "The plaza? That's too expensive," Lena protested. "It's on me," Jonathan insisted. "And before you argue, please let me do this small thing. After everything, it's the least I can do." There was a long pause before Lena sighed. "Fine, thank you." Within an hour, Jonathan had arranged not just a room but a suite at the plaza for Lena. He dropped off the key card at her brownstone personally, thinking he would simply leave it with the doorman. To his surprise, Lena was waiting in the lobby with a small suitcase. "You didn't have to deliver it yourself," she said, but she looked touched by the gesture. "I wanted to make sure everything was taken care of," Jonathan replied. He nodded to her suitcase. "Can I give you a ride to the hotel?" Lena hesitated, then nodded. "That would be nice, thank you." In the car, she seemed more relaxed than usual. "Matthew told me about the basketball games. He seems to be enjoying them." "Really?" Jonathan couldn't hide his pleasure at this news. "He's never said anything to me." "He wouldn't," Lena said with a small smile. "He's still protecting himself, but I can tell he's starting to look forward to Sundays." The knowledge that his son had spoken positively about him to Lena warmed Jonathan's heart. "And what about you?" he asked carefully. "How do you feel about all this?" Lena looked out the window, watching the city lights pass by. "Confused," she admitted. "For 20 years I taught myself not to think about you, not to wonder where you were or what you were doing. Then suddenly you're back in our lives and you're Different from what I expected. Different how? Jonathan asked, echoing her question from weeks earlier. I expected arrogance, selfishness, the same blind ambition that made you leave in the first place. She turned to face him. But you've been patient with Matthew, respectful of his feelings. It's not what I prepared myself for. People can change, Jonathan said quietly, especially when they realize what really matters. When they arrived at the hotel, Jonathan insisted on carrying her suitcase to the suite. Lena gasped when she saw the elegant space with its view of Central Park. This is too much, Jonathan. It's nothing, he said honestly. Just a room. Lena shook her head, looking around at the luxury. This is the kind of place I used to dream about when we were young. Remember how we'd walk by fancy hotels and imagine staying in them someday? The memory caught Jonathan by surprise, their early days together, planning a future that had never materialized. I remember, he said softly. We had so many dreams. You achieved yours, Lena pointed out. No, Jonathan corrected her. I achieved what I thought were my dreams. I was wrong. Their eyes met, and for a moment, Jonathan could almost feel the connection that had once bound them together. The love he had carelessly discarded in his rush for success. Thank you for the room, Lena said, breaking the moment. I should get settled. Jonathan nodded and moved toward the door. Of course, if you need anything else, just call. Jonathan, Lena called as he was leaving. Would you like to have dinner tomorrow night to thank you for this? Jonathan's heart leapt at the invitation. I'd love to. The next evening, they met at a quiet restaurant near the hotel. The conversation flowed more easily than at any time since their reunion, as they cautiously explored the people they had become over 20 years apart. Do you ever wonder, Lena asked over dessert, what might have happened if you'd stayed? Jonathan had asked himself that question countless times since discovering Matthew. I think about it every day, he admitted. We would have struggled financially, at least at first, but we would have been together when Matthew was born. I would have seen his first steps, heard his first words. He looked just like you, even as a baby, Lena said softly. Sometimes it was hard to look at him and not see your face. The thought that his features had been a painful reminder to Lena cut Jonathan deeply. I'm so sorry, he said, the words inadequate for the magnitude of his regret. Not just for leaving, but for how I left. No explanation, no goodbye. You deserved better. Yes, I did, Lena agreed. But that was a long time ago. We've both had to make peace with the past to move forward. Have you? Jonathan asked. Made peace with it? Lena considered the question. I had to for Matthew's sake. Children can sense resentment, and I didn't want him growing up with that burden. He still resents me, though, Jonathan pointed out. That's different. He's entitled to his own feelings about you. Lena took a sip of her wine. But he's coming around, Jonathan. Give him time. When he walked her back to the hotel, Jonathan felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in years. They weren't the young couple they had once been, but something new was developing between them. A friendship built on shared concern for their son and the beginnings of forgiveness. The following Sunday, Matthew surprised Jonathan by inviting him to dinner at Lena's apartment. Mom's boiler is fixed and she's making her famous lasagna, he explained after their basketball game. Well, ordering it from Tony's and putting it in her own dish, but don't tell her I told you that. Jonathan laughed. Your secret is safe with me. That evening, as he approached Lena's brownstone with a bottle of wine and flowers, Jonathan felt uncharacteristically nervous. This wasn't just another meal, it was his first invitation to their home, the space where Matthew had grown up without him. Lena answered the door, looking relaxed in casual clothes. Come in, she said, accepting the flowers with a smile. Matthew's setting the table. The apartment was modest but warm, filled with books and framed photographs. Jonathan's eyes were immediately drawn to the pictures of Matthew through the years. As a toothless baby, a serious child in a science fair, a teenager in a graduation cap and gown. The visual timeline of all he had missed. Dinner's almost ready, Lena called from the kitchen. Matthew, show your father around while I finish up. Matthew gave Jonathan a brief tour, pointing out features of the apartment with quiet pride. Mom's had her teaching job since I was in elementary school. Before that, we lived in a much smaller place in Queens. In Matthew's old bedroom, now converted to a home office but still displaying academic trophies and science awards, Jonathan noticed a framed photograph he hadn't expected. It showed him and Lena on their wedding day, young and smiling. "Mom always kept that out," Matthew said, following his gaze. "Said I should know where I came from, even if you weren't around." Jonathan swallowed hard. "She's an extraordinary woman, your mother." "She is," Matthew agreed. "She never said a bad word about you, you know. Even when I was angry and asking questions, she just said you had a different path to follow." The knowledge that Lena had protected his image in Matthew's eyes, despite every reason to vilify him, humbled Jonathan. "I didn't deserve that kindness from her?" "No, you didn't," Matthew agreed bluntly. "But that's who she is. She always sees the best in people." During dinner, Jonathan noticed the easy rapport between mother and son, the inside jokes, the comfortable silences, the way they anticipated each other's needs. They were a family, formed through years of depending only on each other. He was the outsider, and he knew it would take time, if ever, for that to change. As Lena served coffee after the meal, Matthew suddenly said, "I've been offered a research position at Mayo Clinic." Both Lena and Jonathan looked at him in surprise. "It's a 2-year fellowship," Matthew continued. "Working with Dr. Ransom on his immunotherapy trials, it's an amazing opportunity." "That's wonderful news," Lena said, though Jonathan could see the hint of sadness in her eyes at the thought of Matthew moving away. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I just got the official offer yesterday," Matthew explained, "and I wanted to tell you both together." The inclusion that Matthew had waited to share his news with both of them touched Jonathan deeply. "Congratulations," he said sincerely. "It sounds like an incredible opportunity." "When would you start?" Lena asked. "September," Matthew replied. "I'd have to move to Rochester, Minnesota." "That's only 6 months from now," Lena said, her voice soft with the realization. "I know it's far," Matthew acknowledged, "but it's the kind of experience that could really advance my research." "Then you have to go," Jonathan said firmly. "Your work is too important not to pursue every advantage." Matthew looked at him with something close to gratitude. "Thanks. I was hoping you'd both understand." Later, as Jonathan prepared to leave, Matthew walked him to the door. "I wanted to ask you something," the young man said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Mom's birthday is next month. I was thinking of getting her a weekend at that spa upstate she's always talking about, but it's pretty expensive on my student budget." "I'd be happy to help," Jonathan offered immediately. "No," Matthew said quickly. "That's not what I meant. I don't want your money. I was thinking maybe we could go in on it together, as a gift from both of us." The suggestion that Matthew wanted to share the gift, to present a united front to Lena, meant more to Jonathan than any progress they had made so far. "I would be honored," he said simply. Over the next month, Jonathan found himself spending more time with both Matthew and Lena. The three of them gradually established a new dynamic, not the family they might have been, but something unique to their complicated circumstances. For Lena's birthday, Matthew and Jonathan surprised her with the spa weekend and a dinner at her favorite restaurant. Watching her face light up with pleasure, Jonathan felt a familiar stirring in his heart, feelings he had buried long ago resurfacing with unexpected strength. As spring turned to summer, Matthew became increasingly busy preparing for his move to Minnesota. Jonathan helped where he could, researching apartments in Rochester and connecting Matthew with a college friend who worked at Mayo Clinic. One evening in July, Jonathan invited Lena to dinner at a quiet restaurant overlooking the harbor. The sunset cast a golden glow over the water as they sat on the terrace. "Matthew seems excited about the move," Jonathan observed. "But I know you're going to miss him terribly." Lena nodded, her eyes reflecting the sunset. "It's the right thing for him, but yes, it will be hard having him so far away. We've never been separated for more than a few days before." "You've done an amazing job with him, Lena," Jonathan said sincerely. "I look at the man he's become, His intelligence, his compassion, his determination, and I see you in all of it. He has your drive, Lena replied. Your focus. When he sets his mind to something, nothing can stop him. Like abandoning his family for a business empire? Jonathan said with self-deprecating bitterness. Lena shook her head. No, like channeling that ambition into work that will help others. She paused. You've changed, Jonathan. I didn't think it was possible, but you have. Meeting Matthew changed me, he admitted. Seeing what I missed, what I threw away. He took a deep breath. And seeing you again. Lena looked away, but not before Jonathan caught the flicker of emotion in her eyes. We can't go back, she said softly. Too much time has passed. I don't want to go back, Jonathan replied. The man I was then doesn't deserve you or Matthew, but maybe the man I'm trying to become could at least be your friend. The word friend felt inadequate for the feelings growing inside him, but he wouldn't pressure her for more. Lena reached across the table and took his hand, the first time she had initiated physical contact since their reunion. I'd like that, she said. Friendship. In August, they helped Matthew pack up his apartment and finalize his arrangements for the move. The night before his departure, Lena hosted a small farewell dinner at her place with a few of Matthew's closest friends. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Matthew took Jonathan aside on the small balcony. I wanted to thank you, he said, surprising Jonathan, for everything you've done these past few months. I haven't done anything, Jonathan protested. You showed up, Matthew countered. You stuck around even when I made it difficult. You respected my boundaries but didn't give up. He paused. And most importantly, you've been there for Mom. I worry about her being alone after I leave. She won't be alone, Jonathan assured him. I'll look out for her if she lets me. Matthew nodded. I know. He hesitated, then added, I've been calling you Jonathan all this time because Dad felt wrong, like you hadn't earned it yet. Jonathan's heart clenched at what was coming. I understand. The thing is, Matthew continued, these past few months you've been acting like a dad, a real one. He extended his hand. So, thanks, Dad. The word, spoken for the first time with intention rather than as a casual reference to others, brought tears to Jonathan's eyes. He took Matthew's hand, then pulled him into an embrace. Thank you, son, he whispered. The next morning at the airport, the three of them stood together at the security checkpoint. Matthew hugged his mother tightly, both of them fighting tears. Call me as soon as you land, Lena insisted. And every day after that. Maybe not every day, Mom, Matthew said with a smile, but I'll stay in touch. Then he turned to Jonathan. Take care of yourself, Dad. And Mom, too. I will, Jonathan promised. And if you need anything at all, I'm just a phone call away. After Matthew had disappeared into the security line, Jonathan and Lena walked silently back to the parking garage. In the car, Lena finally broke down, the tears she had been holding back for her son's sake flowing freely. Without thinking, Jonathan pulled her into his arms, holding her as she cried. He's going to be fine, he murmured into her hair. And so are you. I know, Lena said, wiping her eyes. It's just hard to let go. You don't have to go through this alone, Jonathan said. I'm here. Lena looked up at him, her tear-stained face more beautiful to him than any woman he had dated in the past 20 years. Why are you here, Jonathan? Really? The question demanded complete honesty. Because I never stopped loving you, he admitted. I buried those feelings under ambition and pride, but they never went away. Finding you and Matthew again made me realize what I threw away, what really matters. Lena studied his face, searching for any sign of insincerity. Love isn't enough by itself, she said finally. There has to be commitment, sacrifice, showing up every day even when it's hard. I know, Jonathan agreed, and I'm not asking for anything right now except the chance to prove I've changed, to be part of your life in whatever way you'll allow. Lena was quiet for a long moment. I can't make any promises, she said at last, but I'm willing to see where this goes slowly. It wasn't a declaration of love, but it was hope, a possibility that hadn't existed 6 months ago. For Jonathan, it was enough, In the months that followed, as autumn painted the city in rich colors, Jonathan and Lena cautiously built a new relationship. They spoke to Matthew often, delighting in his enthusiastic reports about his research. Together, they flew to Minnesota for Thanksgiving, the three of them sharing the holiday as a family for the first time. On Christmas Eve, Jonathan took Lena to see the tree at Rockefeller Center, just as they had done when they were young and in love. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. "It's not what you think," he added quickly when her eyes widened. "I know. We're not there yet, maybe we never will be, and that's okay." Lena opened the box to find a simple silver key. "What's this?" "The key to a house in Rochester," Jonathan explained. "A few blocks from where Matthew lives. It's yours, no strings attached. So you can visit him whenever you want, stay as long as you like. I bought one for myself too on the other side of town." Tears filled Lena's eyes. "You did this for me?" "For both of us," Jonathan corrected, "so neither of us has to miss any more of his life, and so he knows that even though we're not together, we're both there for him." Lena looked at the key, then back at Jonathan. "But we could be," she said softly. "Could be what?" "Together." She took his hand. "Not like before, we're different people now. But maybe something new, something better." The hope that had been growing in Jonathan's heart blossomed into joy. "Are you sure? I don't want to rush you." "Jonathan," Lena said with a smile, "after 20 years apart and 6 months of the slowest courtship in history, I don't think anyone could accuse us of rushing." As snowflakes began to fall around them, Jonathan pulled her close. "I promise." "You, Lena," he whispered. "I will never leave again. Whatever comes, we'll face it together." "Together," she echoed, rising on her toes to kiss him. A kiss that spoke of forgiveness, of second chances, of a future neither of them had dared to imagine. That night, as they walked hand in hand through the snowy streets of New York, Jonathan's phone chimed with a message from Matthew. It was a selfie of him in his Minnesota apartment, wearing the Christmas sweater they had sent him, with the caption, "Merry Christmas to my mom and dad. Love you both." Jonathan showed the message to Bay, Lena, his heart full to bursting. The son he never knew had given him the greatest gift of all, a second chance at family, at love, at the life he should have chosen the first time. As they approached Lena's brownstone, now decorated with twinkling lights, Jonathan realized that all the success, all the wealth, all the power he had accumulated over 20 years meant nothing compared to this moment of belonging. He had lost 20 years with his family, but he would make the most of every day he had left. The past couldn't be changed, but the future was theirs to write together, one day at a time.